received a note from AJ saying he couldn't make it. Jordan was going to join, but last minute had a conflict. I don't know who else we're going to get.
Is Eric going to join?
I have not heard from Eric.
Mm. Yeah, because I see a few items in the infrastructure side.
Yeah.
And what's going on with atomics?
It, everything's working again.
Yeah.
Thanks to Andy.
Thanks to Andy. Yep.
Thank you, Andy.
Oh, sure. Happy to help.
Well, your call. Do you think we can make progress with this group,
Well,
Larry?
I do want to at least, even though we don't have Eric here, I want to brainstorm on the third item under infrastructure and get other people's ideas in here. Let's go ahead and go. And if we've got stuff like for Eric, we're gonna have to take it offline and connect with him. Um, is that the case in the first bullet, Gabriel?
Yeah, I think I need to I need some help from him. So kind of to give you the whole team better context of this. As part of the work that we are doing, so we are interested in adding this OpenSSF kind of like a scorecard from practices to make sure that whoever uses our software can be confident that we are following several security practices in general. So we started doing a few things towards this end. So if you open the hyperlink, we have only this scorecard index just for the AMF because that's the component that we're using as a reference point. And from here, if you see the second and third bullet, which are kind of the most relevant, high priority, and this is what I need kind of like the help from Eric, especially from the first one, the token. It seems like the token we are using the classical token that has permissions for everything. So I think we need to be a little bit more narrow on what permissions the token that we are using for the GitHub actions has. So it doesn't need to have a very wide open permissions. So we need to kind of limit the scope. From the branch protection as well. I mean, I was expecting to have that like a full like 10 out of 10, but I need to understand why for the branch protection side we are not getting the full 10 points on that. So those are the main two things that I wanted to some help from Eric, because from the at least from the token perspective, I don't have visibility into that side. So I have admin access and certain stuff, but to the token level, I do not have accessibility to that, and I have no visibility basically. So, and this is that we're doing for the AMF. Again, it's going to be replicated for all the repositories in the SD core or in the OMED project 5G components.
So these are GitHub permissions that you don't have, right?
I don't have visibility to see the token itself. So because the token is linked to a user, and that user, I don't have credentials for that user. So
it should be the case, and this is kind of a blanket thing, and it's a little bit related to my bullet agenda item later on. There really shouldn't be anything that we have to have Eric do for us on GitHub.
Yeah, that's where I was headed.
Would you agree with that statement?
I don't know who you're asking, but that's where I was headed to, Larry. That's why I asked the question.
So Gabriel, what is your reaction to that?
I'm not 100% certain on that side, because that becomes more like an overhead for us.
Well, if one day, hypothetically, in the future, there was no Eric, then this is maintenance mode means complete community ownership.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm extrapolating a bit from where you started, but
yeah. And, I mean, let me step into. I don't know the extent to which we've talked about it in this group, but I mean, effectively, the Aether board just took a vote, and kind of where things are headed with the project is that funding levels, new funding is not coming into the project, The project is kind of running off of legacy funding. The project's funded through the first half of next year, effectively, but we are needing to move towards a maintenance mode or or 100% community ownership mode, and we should be thinking about it for the starting the second half of next year. And Larry's got some things on here already, but we should really be trying to a good way to think about it is whenever we're leaning on LF resources for anything like Ask of Eric, we should really be taking note of it and trying to understand the extent to which or what it would take for really members of the TST to have the right permissions to be able to do things. We are we have sort of a path for the project where we think it has a very solid landing spot, kind of sort of under an umbrella and with an umbrella with some other projects, and we're looking at two options, and we'll be talking about them more as more details kind of come up. And we think there'll be some level of PM support and some level of we're hoping of IT support, but we should expect it to be less than what we have now, and we should be really shooting for self-sufficiency. Right. So that's, I think, the background, that brings us to this discussion. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Okay, that makes sense in general. So so who, from the TST perspective, who is going to take ownership? There is a group of people in the TST, right?
One approach would be that if you are on the TST, then you have, by definition, the necessary permissions. That doesn't mean you're the person on call, but that would be one way of scoping permissions.
But okay, but this TST is covering 3 different projects, right?
Yep, that would be across the
Well,
subsystems.
it would be 4 different projects from Rock, Rick, SD Core, and OnRamp. Or doesn't.
You're right that we're spread across multiple sub-projects, but and we could modify this, but this is sort of the first cut would be. I mean, we could get finer grained certainly, and I think you're right that per project there would be the lead, let's call them, that would step forward and actually take responsibility. But just in terms of permissions, it would seem reasonable that every TST member has the necessary permissions and all of these on GitHub, for example.
Yeah, so I think there are questions that need to be answered. We have a decent amount of time, to figure it out. We're starting early and with visibility. My first shot at would be that yes, like Larry said, all TST members should have the right permissions. And that amongst the TST member, probably there should be a volunteer to be the lead for each component, the go-to person with maybe a backup. That would be kind of ideal.
Yeah.
If there's nobody on the TST willing to be the lead person on a component, then I would question the community viability of the component. In
Correct.
Essence, maybe that component needs to go into an archive state or some other kind of state.
Yep. Okay.
If those are the rules, that might create the playing field that could allow the TST to navigate this and carry it forward.
Right. Yeah. I agree on the having only 1 or 2 people per project, but not necessarily the whole TST having access to everything, because that's going to be a little more kind of challenging to manage or who makes changes on what. So, but if you have 1 lead and 1, let's say, backup, that will be the 1 or 2 people contact point of contacts to any specific issue for that specific project.
Yeah, exactly. Clear ownership. You don't want just sort of anarchy and chaos. Different people.
Correct.
Yeah. So that, but it is, I think, for the TST to decide. And also, we have a TST election coming up towards the end of the year, and with this context, we should, and the TST should be thinking about, who might the right individuals be, and if there are community members that have a stake and care about a certain component, this is the right time for them to join the TST if they're not already on the TST. Kind of.
But Simon, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, yeah, there are elections coming up at the end of the year, but I understand from last time that is just half of the TST group that is
Correct.
gonna get kind of elected, right? Because the other half was just elected at
That's
the
correct.
end of last year.
Yep, that's correct. Every other 2-year rotating seat on the TST, and we do half of them. We try to do half of them each year.
Right. But
Now,
so maybe can you say more about why you ask about the 2-year rotation? Gabriel?
no, that was I didn't say anything about the 2-year rotation. That was Larry who mentioned the
Well,
2-year
no, but
rotation.
you raised the issue of half of the people will be up for election. So I was wondering, I think
Right.
maybe Timon's asking what that's about.
I was asking why you were asking the question. And I mean, I don't know if you're concerned that you know, we don't have an opportunity to get the right people on or what, but you know, I was just going to really say that I think the TST should feel the liberty to really, you know, if there are other changes that are needed in one way, shape, or form, you know, if it needs to be bigger, smaller, different people, there are some people missing that, you know, if the election structure is too narrow and doesn't create the room to bring the right people in and have the right structure, that should be a discussion that we have, you know, I think it's more important, it's not so important that we follow very strict rules. It's more important that we get the right TST.
Yeah, no. In my case, my comment about the elections was that my understanding was that the half of the board is going to be elected 1 year, and then the other half in the next year, and so on. So that and that's what I was wondering, whether this year is going to be like full board, the full TST, let's say, that's going to get elected, or what has changed. That was my only kind of question.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so you know, if I mean, by default, it's going to be half the board getting elected,
Yeah.
half the
No.
seats. But you know,
Okay.
just my point is that if for some reason that doesn't serve the project well, we should talk
Mhm.
about it. You know.
Yeah. Two more comments about it, since we're talking about the TST. Based on the meeting that we had with the LF team last week, Timon, and then the Navy, would it make sense to rename the TST to TSC, kind of like following LF, you know, naming convention, such that is kind of more generic for with whoever is not familiar with the TST term? It's just kind of
Yeah.
align.
So I think that's a good question, and I'm just repeating for everybody. It doesn't make sense to rename the TST to TSC, which is the standard LF standard terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good idea. I don't have a well-formed opinion. I don't know how difficult it would be if that terminology is ingrained somewhere that creates a problem. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. It's just, yeah, we just were staying with what was familiar to us, not worrying about LF so much. But sure.
Yeah, no. I mean, in this case, I'm bringing to the, you know, to the attention, because, you know, last week we had a meeting with the LF people, and then they had to kind of clarify to a third party, saying, you know, TST in Ether is the same thing as when you talk on TSC in LF. So, you know, if there is no attachment to this TSC, why not following a uniform naming for basically the same thing? That's kind of my only comment
It
and
makes
suggestion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say I'm completely supportive of it if there are no change costs, and I just don't know what the change costs would be just yet. You know, things are renaming, people confused. You know, I don't know. It might be very, you know, if there are no, you know, that's really a simple change. I would put it on the list and just think about it. You know, and probably at the end, you know, the turn of the year would be a perfect time to do it.
Yeah, again, since we are part of a, you know, we're a Linux project, yeah, Linux Foundation project, so it would make sense to kind of be aligned to the naming convention that they use.
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
kind of
well,
there.
yeah, and I mentioned that, you know, there are kind of two landing paths for Ether that are being considered. You know, one is Ether joining the LFN, the Linux Foundation Networking Umbrella Project, and it is true that you know, sub projects in there, I mean, following all the same conventions would certainly be the smoothest thing to do. It may be even all completely mandatory. I don't know, you know, and they do have sort of formalized like onboarding and management things and whatnot too. And And it's really through joining something. I mean, LFN is kind of an existing organized umbrella. They have sort of clear structure about what services subprojects get, and how they could get some PM support and some marketing support, and maybe a little IT support, or at least hosting on GitHub, or there's some things like that. But kind of following their structure would make all of that a lot smoother and easier.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the most structured landing path. The other kind of landing path, as I would put it, is right now that Okudu is the kind of the newly funded project that just got a bunch of money, 30 million from the government. It's to work on RAN. I don't imagine really there's money for Ether, but what we're talking about doing is kind of attaching Ether to that project in some way, shape, or form. We don't know exactly what that would look like. And that may also create sort of a continuation path for the project, and maybe it gets a bit of support or whatnot too, but at least it becomes part of maybe the standard test cycle for Okudu. And that's going to be a hotspot of activity. And there's a movement towards creating a new umbrella fund supporting Okudu and the like. I would imagine, I haven't asked the question, but I would be almost certain that Okudu is going to follow all the same kind of LF conventions in terms of naming. And again, being structured, as a standard LF project probably help with that assimilation or whatever
Yeah.
it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's a good point.
Yeah, so then my other comment about the elections, so it would be good to kind of reach out to people who are already using the project. So for example, we know the iOS MCM team is using this. We are trying also to reach to the Navy to see whether they are interested in kind of being part of this, but it would be good to kind of, we know there are some people that are using this, so it would be good to kind of also have them involved into the TST or the TSC, to kind of get more engaged on all the changes that are happening in primarily it's in the core, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And this is the time to be doing it. It really, I guess, probably should be an agenda item on here as well, to start sort of soft recruiting. And we should think about name. I mean, not a whole pile of names come to mind. CPQD just happened to come to mind, and I think.
Oh yeah.
And occasionally we see people kind of pop up out of the woodwork who are kind of using Ether,
Mm-hmm.
and just not so visible to the community. I mean, Ether, quote unquote, suffers because it's a stable project. And I'm of the belief that a lot of people use it, but since it pretty much works and serves their needs, we don't hear about it,
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we had more visibility. This is a classic problem with all open source. LF complains about it all the time. Like once projects hit this kind of state, there's no longer a lot of impetus to fund the project, a lot of impetus to be on these calls weekly. And that's, in many ways a sign of success of the project, right? If it's still being consumed and downloaded. I wish we knew some more names, or had greater visibility, but we have the visibility we have, but we should start brainstorming amongst ourselves, and maybe we should start some more, directed outreach, and maybe even some broadcast outreach. So that I don't know what form that would look like. So that's a long answer to yes, Gabriel. You're right. Exactly.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, the CPQD guys have interacted a few times, time to time. It's very sporadic, but it would be good, if they can get engaged, because we know that they are using the solution. So, yeah, and the iOS team, MCN team, right? So those would be a good points in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the only two comments I had regarding the TST, and I'll probably maybe aligned to that. I think a message that I sent to you, Larry, about updating the web page for the Ether TST, because it seems kind of like outdated.
Well, it's not super outdated. It's got the what's his name from Canonical on it. I think is all that's wrong, right?
Gisland. Oh yeah, but the affiliations are also outdated, right? So.
Oh, okay.
For Wujun is still showing as Intel instead of Microsoft,
Okay.
for example.
I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah.
Let's continue on here. Your next item is about Slack. Is that Slack permission or is that a GitHub permission?
No, that is the weird part. So it's an email that I just got sorry, 5 minutes before this TST meeting started. So it just says a updated permission request. The GitHub app Slack is requesting additional access to your organization. So I have no idea what it's about, and that's what I was also wanted to see whether Eric was here.
Well, so
Uh,
I've got Slack permissions. You've got OMEC permissions. This was OMEC. I think I got the same email. This was OMEC related. I looked through Slack and didn't see anything obvious that needed to be done.
oh yeah, no, it's not in Slack. It's in GitHub.
And so it's on the GitHub side.
On the GitHub side, that Slack is requesting for some permissions, but I don't know who asked for these changes of kind of permissions. So the Slack app
I don't know that
directly.
anyone asked for it. It may be a change in Slack somewhere.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to kind of understand to make sure that nothing gets whatever change it is basically intentional. Is not something that is not
Yeah,
unexpected.
I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah, me neither, and that's what I was wondering whether Eric was gonna be here. So
Well, but this is Eric. This is something that, I don't know that Eric is all that helpful. Maybe he just knows more about it than we do. But we have sufficient permissions.
in my case, it's more to double check who asked for this, right? So as far as I know, I haven't.
And I haven't made any changes on the Slack side.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be they have admin access to the OMEC project organization, but again, I don't know who else has this kind of access and whether there was somebody else requesting for this.
Well, I just got the email too, so I'll see if I can figure something out on the Slack side. It's possible.
Mm.
So to the next point, which I would like to get some feedback on. One of our biggest costs that we're going to have to figure out another solution is all the VMs we spin up on AWS. So I'm not going to go back to my notes, but there's 2 or 3 VMs that are supporting static. They're static VMs. They're there all the time. They run the Jenkins service. They run serve documents and so on. Those are the 2 big ones. And the Helm charts I think are published on the Harbor Registry. I think is on one of those VMs. Point is, suppose those go away, which I think in all likelihood is going to happen. What do we do? Well, Jenkins and the VMs we spin up there are problematic. We might find some way of, from time to time, running tests on someone's hardware, but I don't know what to do about, day-to-day integration tests. So if anyone has any great ideas there, I'm happy to hear. But on the other 3, the docs, the images, and the charts, I believe we can publish everything we want to publish on some combination of GitHub or a public registry like Docker Hub. And I was trying to think, there is a Helm chart registry, isn't there? Maybe artifacts.io, I forget where it is. Does anybody know?
For GitHub?
For charts.
Yeah, but in GitHub?
Helm charts.
Oh, in chart, okay. So I believe it's doable to have the charts in GitHub. So
yeah, and that's sort of what we did with it. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's entirely what happened with Atomics, right?
the Atomic,
Right.
correct? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Can
we do the same thing with the Docker images?
I believe we could do something similar. Yes, because for example, from the at least from historical, a context, the UPF images were getting published before in GitHub. So in the past, they were getting published in GitHub, and then at some point, a couple years ago, kind of to try to align everything in, like, make it consistent, the whole SD core. That's where we started publishing everything on the Ether project registry.
So it would make sense to publish on Docker, a combination of Docker Hub and a GitHub registry.
Yeah. The only kind of like drawback from the GitHub is basically, sorry, from Docker Hub, is that there is a rate limiting. So this basically you cannot just, especially during development phase, trying to kind of redeploy the core network multiple times. That's when we face the issue with this
Right.
rate limiting, and that's why we went through the Ether project registry. So we don't have any limitations there.
Right. So publishing the docs on GitHub, the Ether book does this. So in fact, all of our system approach books publish on GitHub now. So we just need to change the workflow, the publish workflow, to do that. All right, so high order bit here is, with the exception of the integration tests that get run nightly, we should be able to move the other workload that is on Amazon into GitHub. That still leaves Jenkins. I don't know if anyone has any suggestions there.
Please say one more time, please. I got a little bit lost.
So of the four things on the agenda here that I'm talking about trying to get rid of, to wean ourselves from AWS, we have answers to docs, images, and charts.
Correct. Yes.
We don't have an answer for is Jenkins.
Okay.
And these are the integration tests. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any brainstorming ideas for those.
Should we follow a similar approach that we are doing for the SD core, for the end-to-end test in the SD core? Because in the end-to-end, go ahead.
You could. I mean, yeah. All right. So adopt the core's end-to-end test. The thing is, what you're doing for SD core is a subset of these, because they aren't they're testing the SD core, but they're in end-to-end way, but they're not testing all the possible end-to-ends, which is a heavy. You wouldn't want to do that every time you check something in.
No, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking is as a generic solution, right? So in Ether, in SD core, we are only interested about the end-to-end control plane and user plane from the 5G perspective, right? That's it. We're not interested about anything else.
Right.
From the Jenkins jobs that you already have, you are interested on end-to-end, not just on the core, but also on the rig, on the rack, on the AMP, and many more things.
Right.
But under the hood, these are just GitHub actions. So what I'm saying is that in the end-to-end tests, what we do is basically we clone on-ramp, we deploy Kubernetes, we deploy the SD core, and then we deploy Gnode vSIM, and then we run end-to-end tests. So basically following a similar approach where, for example, for the case of AMP, you don't need to just deploy the SD core. You need to deploy the SD core, but also you need to deploy the ROC and some other components. So it would be good if you can take a look. Let me share the link of how we have these GitHub actions. Then it would be kind of like, it's very generic, basically what we're doing in here. Let's see. No, it's not.
Yeah. I get the idea, and Eric understands it, so Eric could help us do that too.
So that's one aspect of it, which is moving everything into GitHub effectively, right? The other aspect of it is, what does end-to-end testing mean, or integration testing? which is what we use Jenkins for mainly. And I wonder if, depending on how the Ether project lands, I'm imagining that there's going to be, one or more quote unquote blueprints. Imagine with Okudu that Ether is getting used with Okudu, and there's some kind of testing framework.
Mhm.
That integration or that blueprint might dictate what happens with Jenkins. Maybe they have their own Jenkins and servers, and it would suck in Ether. Maybe they're using some other testing framework. Maybe, so that might be something that we need to figure out, kind of a self-sustaining path for Ether, but we might also be looking for and expect to find something that is driven by the umbrella under which Ether eventually, kind of rolls in.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So Larry, if you open the link that I share with you through the chat, then so this workflow, if you follow the quick start, the Jenkins job quick start, this is gonna be fairly similar. There's gonna be only one step or two that are different. But besides that, everything else, if you see, is basically the same, your same Jenkins job. So the one that says line 85. So line 85, that is what is different. So this is a specific for our deployment. Because we need to create a local image with the PR and so on. But you can ignore that part because you don't need that specific component. But everything else, if you follow the steps, is basically the same.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, there's nothing different except, again, whatever is in line 85 and all that section on line 85. But before that, if you see, we deploy Kubernetes, we deploy the 5G, and then if you skip line 85 and the whole section on line 85.
Right. So it makes sense that if you made a change to RIC, for example, you could do something very similar to this and test the RIC in combination with the core, and that is a quote unquote end test. What's missing here is when you touch component X, it potentially there's multiple end tests to run. It may affect something way over and when SDN ran runs, and you just you didn't test that one. There's a wider space of tests being run. But that being said, this is a much better than doing nothing. Significantly better.
No, Larry. Think this end-to-end test YAML file. Think that is your Jenkins quick start. And then you can create another file similar to this that is specifically to test the AMP. Another test similar to that to test the run. Basically, what you have exactly in the Jenkins job. So you have one file for each of your different scenarios. And then you can make them run all of them.
Where is it getting? So there are other cases where we actually spin up 2 VMs. Because we're testing.
Then I haven't tested that part. Probably there is no such an option. So
okay, that's fine. Let's stay with the 1 VM case. In the 1 VM case, are you getting a VM? What is the environment?
So go a little bit up, a little bit more. So I stay on line 45. So all the section on line 45 is exactly the same thing that you do on Jenkins when you get the IP address from UVM and all the stuff related to Ether for the configuration.
So, all right, so let's.
Yeah, the first line 17, we're telling it what kind of VM we want. So in this case, we want Ubuntu latest, which is.
This is the key that I wasn't clear on. So you're getting an Ubuntu VM.
Yes.
From?
An instance from GitHub. GitHub, which is basically a GitHub runner.
So you're right. So you're getting an Ubuntu instance VM from GitHub, and they've not charged us for any of those.
Yep. Well, I don't necessarily know whether that's a full VM that we get or some kind of container, but there's some computing instance that we get from there.
But it's sufficient to run quick start.
Correct.
All right. Good. That's helpful. I'll need to look at this more closely, but it does look very familiar, so that's good.
Yeah, this is like similar to your Jenkins jobs. And again, if you want an Ubuntu 22, you can, instead of using Ubuntu latest, which is going to be at this point of time, is going to be Ubuntu 24.04. You can indicate that you want an Ubuntu 22.04. That's it. So it's
Good. All right, thanks. All right, so Timon, popping back up, there is an answer for everything we do.
Mhm.
I was focusing much more narrowly here on the AWS VMs that we're paying for. There are other things that cost money, but they tend to be low enough impact that I'm not too worried about them just yet.
uh, uh, Larry, one question about the AWS machines. So you mentioned, I think that these machines are deployed 24/7. Is it correct? At least for the Jenkins jobs, or is just on demand?
No. Jenkins spins up VMs on demand, but the
Okay.
Jenkins service runs in a persistent VM. It's actually
Mm,
co-located. I forget which ones are co-located. There's a permanent VM that serves the documents, and there's
right.
and I think I forget if Jenkins is co-located in that VM or another permanent VM.
Oh, okay.
I believe. Well, here.
Yeah, but at least docs, images, and charts, I believe we can have a different workaround for that.
There are Jenkins and the Docker registries are in one VM. Docs and the chart registries are in another VM.
Hmm.
They
Okay.
so Timon VM hosts crowd, but that's ONF's crowd, which we're not using anymore for Ether, but it's possible that LF Broadband still uses it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, to my knowledge, that should have been turned down, but I haven't looked at it in over a year, so that might just be lingering.
Well, now wait a minute. And I'm crowd server, crowdopennetworking.org runs at 54.188. These are my notes. Um,
Yeah, that's the one that you have there, like the 4 VM.
yeah. Oh no, that's yeah, that is the same one. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's two AWS accounts. There are possibly four VMs here, one of which we should no longer be doing. I've yeah, I've that does read as though there are four VMs. I knew there was some co-location. The docs and the chart registries are. I do know those to be on the same VM. Okay, good. Um, so let's wrap up here pretty quickly. We've spent a fair amount of time, but I think we made good progress. So onto the SD core.
Yeah, so this is kind of aligned to what I was mentioning earlier on the infrastructure side. Try to address these token permissions and things like that to try to get a reasonable score. And the idea is to make these across all the different network functions, all the components of the SD core, and following the same kind of approach that we have for the other GitHub actions, we make this as a reusable workflow. So we are testing for the moment with the AMF, and then after we kind of finalize the whole testing with AMF, then we can go across all the different NFs.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and then what else do we have there? Oh, testing score. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that is from the SD core. I probably didn't put it. Yeah, I didn't put in there. Is like we're still kind of having some slow but steady progress on the 3GPP release upgrade, and that's what I wanted to. I got a little bit confused with the maintenance phase for the project while we are still doing kind of development
Well,
on that side.
I'm
So,
hoping development continues.
okay.
Maintenance, I'm sorry, don't read maintenance as there's no development. Maintenance
Hmm.
is purely who's willing to pony up the money for infrastructure.
Okay.
That's entirely, and as we just saw, there's a way to continue doing development.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, so that is from that side, and then I think we continue also besides the release 18 upgrade, we continue on the consolidating GitHub actions. I mean, sorry, dependencies. So we are down to a little bit more than 40 dependencies. We started with 70 plus dependencies that were kind of like across the old OMF project. So the idea is to kind of consolidate this, kind of use the same version, kind of go into the latest version. Some stuff got kind of outdated from 2020, 2019, and some stuff still even older. So I think we're gonna get down to 40 or maybe a little bit less than 40 dependencies. So we basically we narrow our possible surface, for the whole project. So the fewer dependencies, more depending on Go itself, to kind of have a security side, less exposure from that
That
from
would
that
be,
perspective.
yeah, that sounds like a really worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, so that's something that we're kind of still having progress on. One of the things that also I wanted to see if there is somebody that can help us on the on-ramp side. Something that was brought to our attention kind of like mid-year this year is the IP table entries are not persistent. So basically, as soon as the machine where the SD code is running gets rebooted, these IP table entries are go away, and of course, there is no traffic going through the SD core. So if we can, if there is somebody that can help us kind of like working on this part, I start doing some initial attempt uh, using some, let me
Well,
see
so
how
this
is it
is, I
called.
would argue this is correct behavior for some use cases.
Why is it correct behavior?
If you are purely doing a test, you do not want these to survive. But if you're trying to
Why not?
run, I would argue that it's not always it would need to be an option.
Mm, But why not? Why you didn't want to survive? So I mean, if you deploy that and whatever happens with the machine, everything should be working to the point when you remove everything, and then remove these entries as well. So that's what I'm wondering
Yeah,
why.
all right, maybe you're right. That was, um, yeah, maybe you're right.
So if I, as a user, basically, I'm curious to deploy Ether, right? And then for some reason I say, okay, I'm playing with Ether, doing something, and then suddenly I get some software upgrades for the OS. I reboot the machine, install the upgrades, reboot the machine, and get the new kernel that typically that's the one that requires a reboot. And then, Kubernetes is going to bring everything up back by itself.
But man, if you install a new kernel, you really ought to be refreshing everything, I would think. It just
Mm,
feels like, I mean, I get how this makes life easier in certain circumstances. I'm just not 100% convinced it's the right thing to do generally, but I can be convinced.
No, no. For example, when you install Kubernetes and then you reboot the machine, Kubernetes brings everything that it has
Oh,
set
I know
up
Kubernetes
back.
persists, but there are situations where you really ought to have reinstalled Kubernetes too. And
Uh,
I suspect you're starting down a path that involves so many corner cases. I don't know. And this is sort of too
To me, that to
off
me
the
that would
cuff.
be a regular use case that if the machine goes down, I expect the system. If I haven't removed it, I expect the system to keep working, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't know what happened with the system. So basically, I wouldn't, if I wouldn't be familiar with the system, I say, okay, this doesn't work. Just move on to something else. That's
I,
at least my perspective, right? So,
I get that. I think there's another perspective, which is advice to users of on-ramp. Uh, Apply liberal start from scratch. Be prepared for start from scratch. I, Again, we don't need to beat this to death. It's a valid request, and we should see how hard it is to make it work. I mean, I would assume the reason it's not permanent is that IP table's not permanent. What you really wanted was um, network D or one of the network configuration mechanisms to take care of this for you.
No, in on-ramp, we are actually setting these IP table
I
entries.
know, but instead of
So,
setting them as IP table rules, we could have been doing this through another mechanism that would
oh
have.
yeah, if there is any, whatever mechanism it is there, right? So it doesn't have to be IP. As the key piece here, or the important part here, is that whatever we added should be persistent until we remove them, when we remove the on-ramp, right? So that's kind of
Well,
my
I mean,
point.
and I think where this takes you ultimately is that you would move away from IP tables entirely, I suspect.
That's fine. I mean, whatever solution it is, but as an end user, that is transparent to me, right? Because I'm not going to be playing with the IP table entries.
So since we'll take the luxury of having Andy on the call here, just off the top of your head, do you think it's feasible to eliminate dependency on IP tables? Because a lot of what OnRamp does, it borrowed from Ether in a box.
Ether in a box, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I seem to recall Ether in a Box struggling with this same issue that, you would reboot the machine for whatever reason, just the power goes down, and then um, your IP tables rules would get wiped out. And I thought at some point we introduced a fix to Ether in a Box for this. And I think it was along the lines that you were saying, Larry. It was dealing with things at a higher layer of abstraction than IP tables. It was using like systemd, networkd, or something like that to add those rules. But I don't remember
I think there were
right
things that
now
got moved
more.
there. I suspect there's still a rule or two that, and we also got Bala on when he was debugging OnRamp early on. There were, it seemed like an uncountable number of corner cases that kept biting us. Um, okay, noted.
Yeah, but I have to say that I agree with Gabriel that this seems like a really good uh, functionality to have the rules persist until you explicitly remove them. I feel like in the past users were surprised when they would just disappear after
E-
the machine got rebooted.
Exactly. Machine gets rebooted, there is no traffic, and then, people who are not familiar with this is just simply this doesn't work, and then, try to look for a different solution. So that would be my perspective.
All right.
And
Is there
for IP
anything
routes
else?
as well. For IP routes as well. There are a couple of routes that we can figure for data plane. I guess we should fix or do that too for permanent usage. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and also, Gabriel, just to give you an update on a delay in the on-ramp while after setting up the network. I don't think we need it anymore. I was trying to just make sure that we don't do it in the Ethernet box, but I couldn't find the code repository anymore. But given the playbook, I could see there is no need for there needs to be a delay for 15 seconds. I think we can safely remove it.
Yeah. So probably, Larry, if you can open the link that I just shared, so that's basically gonna point to the two things: the IP table entries and the delay that Vidal is talking about. So here in line 132, we have 4 entries going down that are basically to connect the UPF data with the physical interface, so with the host machine, let's say. This is for the install task, and the uninstall task, we have the opposite, right? So to remove those IP table entries. But in this is basically, as soon as we reboot the machine, these go away. But we do have the opposite task for this. In the uninstall, we can basically, these entries get removed as a first step. And basically what I'm saying is the same approach we should follow, but just to somehow to make this persistent, either to IP table entries or in another mechanism, whatever mechanism it is, but we do have the install part and the uninstall part, which is it's equivalent.
Yeah,
And then
I think pushing it to the extent it can be done, I wouldn't see why not. To move this into System D makes sense. I think that makes it persistent in the way you want.
yeah, but then again, from the user's perspective, it should be transparent, right? So if it deploys and then it should work all the way until the user decides to remove the core, regardless of what happened with the host machine. And then talking to Bilal's point, if you go all the way to the
Yeah,
end of
yeah,
that file,
I know that.
that's those pause, but I couldn't figure out why we are adding these additional, pauses. If there is whether there is a need for that or why is the need for that. So
It was there because at one time it didn't work without it. I mean, IP tables, as I recall, there was a huge amount of weirdness and flakiness here for a long time, which was part of what caused me to be a little cautious about what the alternatives were. But we should look at whether this can be done in System D Network D.
okay. Okay. Yeah, so that's something that I wanted to bring regarding to the on-ramp side, that would be good to have that persistence, so it's a little more transparent from the user side, right? So in our case, we are very familiar with how on-ramp works. If something doesn't work, we know directly where to go, but end users don't necessarily are gonna go to all those steps to try to debug something when, especially if they're in a rush to have something working. So
Are there other topics near the top of the hour here? All right, good progress, everybody. Thank you, and see you in a couple of weeks.
okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.